The diplomatic reception hall on Vorathis Prime stretched 300 meters from entrance to dais, deliberately designed to intimidate. Every species that entered would have time to reconsider their negotiating position while crossing that expanse under observation. Queen Zyrith of the Valorian Empire had crossed it dozens of times, and it had never intimidated her. What intimidated her was the way the crowd parted as she moved through it, creating a buffer zone of carefully maintained distance that made her feel like a walking biohazard. She stood nearly 8 feet tall, her physique built for warfare her people no longer actively waged. Muscle moved beneath deep blue skin marked with the silver war patterns of her lineage. Her armor, ceremonial but functional, had been crafted to emphasize rather than diminish her presence. It worked spectacularly. Nobody ever forgot meeting the Valorian Queen. Nobody ever wanted to meet her twice. Your Majesty, Ambassador Krell from the Thaxian Confederacy bowed precisely, maintaining the exact distance protocol required. 3 feet minimum for warrior-caste Valorians. The trade agreements are progressing well. We anticipate final signatures within the week. Excellent, Zyrith replied, her voice carrying the resonant quality that made Valorian commands impossible to ignore in battle. For diplomacy, she'd learned to modulate it to make it less overwhelming. It helped marginally. Please convey my satisfaction to your government. Krell retreated as soon as protocol allowed. They always did. Across the hall, a group of Valorian males, nobles from her own empire, stood in animated conversation. One glanced at her, met her eyes briefly, then looked away quickly. Zyrith recognized him. Thuron, a decorated commander she'd known since military academy. They'd been friendly once, before her coronation, before she'd grown into the full imposing height that marked dominant Valorian genetics. Now he couldn't hold eye contact for 3 seconds. Her advisor, Kyra, materialized at her elbow with the practiced invisibility of someone who'd spent decades managing royal appearances. Your Majesty, the Centaurian delegation requests audience tomorrow regarding mining rights. Schedule it. Morning before I'm too frustrated to be diplomatic. Kyra's expression remained perfectly neutral, but Zyrith caught the flicker of concern. Are you well, Majesty? Perfectly well. The lie came easily after years of practice. Simply tired of receptions where I'm the most interesting decoration. The Krillian ambassador spoke very highly of your strategic acumen. The Krillian ambassador spoke to you because speaking directly to me made him nervous. Zyrith accepted a beverage from a passing server who avoided eye contact so determinedly he nearly dropped the tray. It's fine, Kyra. I'm aware of my effect on people. Your presence commands respect. My presence commands fear, which people mistake for respect. There's a difference. Kyra fell silent because what could she say? They both knew the truth. Zyrith had spent the past decade establishing her empire as a significant power in this sector, negotiating treaties, building alliances, demonstrating that Valorian might was matched by Valorian wisdom. She was successful by every measurable standard. She was also utterly, devastatingly alone. The Valorian species exhibited strong sexual dimorphism. Females averaged 7 to 8 feet tall with powerful builds, while males typically reached 5 to 6 feet with lighter frames. This had shaped their culture for millennia. Males prided themselves on cunning and strategy, females on strength and protection. Traditionally, relationships formed around complementary roles. Males sought females they could intellectually challenge or culturally elevate. Females sought males they could protect and provide for. Zyrith was the genetic extreme of her sex. Taller than most Valorian females, broader, stronger. She could bench press a small spacecraft and had once arm wrestled a Krogan champion to a stalemate. She commanded armies, governed an empire, and negotiated treaties that shaped sector politics. And every Valorian male she'd ever met had been absolutely terrified of her. Not openly. Valorian culture was too proud for that. Instead, it manifested as excuses. She was too focused on duty for courtship. Her standards were impossibly high. She clearly preferred solitude. The throne consumed all her attention. Nobody said what everyone thought. She was too much. Too tall, too strong, too commanding. Dating her felt like dating a natural disaster. Who wanted a partner you feared might accidentally break you during an argument? She'd tried, early in her reign. There had been a military strategist, Varen, who'd seemed unfazed by her height. They'd courted for months until she'd overheard him telling a friend he felt like a pet rather than a partner. There had been a diplomat, Thessar, who'd appreciated her mind until the first time she'd casually lifted a piece of furniture he'd struggled with, and she'd seen something die in his eyes. There had been others, each encounter teaching her that what Valorian males wanted was someone they could feel strong beside. And nobody felt strong beside Zyrith. The other species were no better. The few brave enough to approach did so as novelty seekers or political opportunists. She'd learned to recognize the type. They wanted to boast about bedding the Valorian queen, or they saw alliance opportunities in romance. Nobody wanted just her, so she'd stopped trying, armored herself in authority, made loneliness into power, pretended the empty quarters and silent evenings were choices rather than defaults. The reception continued around her. Hundreds of beings from dozens of worlds negotiating and networking and forming connections. Zyrith observed from her buffer zone of isolation, cataloging exits and security positions because tactical awareness never stopped, even at parties. A commotion near the entrance drew attention. Alarms, not aggressive but insistent. The station's automated voice, calm and multilingual, announced environmental system malfunction in the diplomatic sector. Nothing dangerous, but everyone would need to relocate to backup areas while repairs were made. Diplomats grumbled but moved with practiced efficiency toward the designated zones. Kyra appeared again. Your Majesty, we're being directed to the station's lower engineering levels. The environmental controls there are independent systems. Engineering levels. Zyrith had never visited those sections. Royalty stayed in the diplomatic quarters, the elegant spaces designed for important people doing important things. How long will repairs take? Estimated 2 hours. 2 hours surrounded by functional machinery instead of political theater. Honestly, it sounded like an improvement. The engineering levels were everything the diplomatic sector wasn't. Crowded, loud, and completely unconcerned with appearances. Beings of various species moved with purposeful chaos, shouting technical specifications and solutions across massive machinery that powered the station. The lighting was harsh and practical. The air smelled like ozone and lubricant. Nobody wore ceremonial anything, and nobody noticed Zyrith's arrival. This itself was so novel that she stood in the entrance for a full minute, waiting for the usual reaction, the sudden silence, the stares, the careful distance. Instead, someone nearly knocked into her while carrying a piece of equipment, shouted sorry, without looking up, and continued on their urgent errand. Your Majesty, perhaps we should find a quieter corner, Kyra suggested, clearly uncomfortable with the chaos. But Zyrith was fascinated. She moved deeper into the engineering bay, watching humans and other species work with remarkable coordination despite the apparent pandemonium. Her height advantage meant she could see over most of the machinery, observing someone, a human, judging by the size and build, wrestling with a particularly uncooperative cooling system. The human was swearing creatively in at least 3 languages, his vocabulary impressive in its vulgarity. He backed out of the machinery, covered in grease, and nearly collided with Zyrith's armored leg. He looked up, and up, and up. Zyrith braced for the usual reactions: fear, shock, nervous retreat. Instead, the human's face split into a delighted grin. Well, you're tall. That's actually perfect. Can you reach that coupling up there? I've been using a ladder, and it's terrible. Zyrith stared at him. He stared back expectantly, apparently waiting for her response, grease smeared across his forehead and absolutely no fear in his expression. What? Zyrith managed. That coupling. He pointed upward at a connection point about 9 feet high. Needs to be tightened. 3/4 turn clockwise. You could reach it standing, right? Save me 2 minutes of ladder setup, and we're really pressed for time here. Zareth found herself reaching for the coupling before consciously deciding to help, following his cheerful instructions while he explained the environmental system malfunction with enthusiastic technical detail. See, the problem is differential thermal expansion. The station's got 3 different architectural materials meeting at awkward angles, and when the cooling systems cycle, everything expands at different rates. Creates these pressure points that nobody thought about during initial construction. We've been retrofitting compensators, but it's tedious work. He glanced up at her, still smiling. Perfect, that's it exactly. You're a natural at this. I'm a queen, Zareth said, bewildered. Oh, is that why the armor's so fancy? That's some great metalwork, Valorian design. He examined her ceremonial breastplate with genuine appreciation. The articulation on these joints is impressive. Form and function, I respect that. A station engineer rushed over, looking panicked. Webb, do you have any idea who you're talking to? Yeah, someone tall enough to reach high places who happened to be available. Lucky timing. Webb, apparently that was his name, returned his attention to the machinery. Thanks for the assist. We should have environmental back online in 20 minutes. You were ordering around the Valorian Queen, the other engineer hissed. Webb looked genuinely surprised. Was I ordering? I thought I was asking. Did it sound like ordering? My ex-wife always said I needed to work on my phrasing. He looked at Zareth apologetically. Sorry if I was bossy, force of habit when systems are failing. Zareth had no idea how to respond. This human, Webb, had treated her like a colleague, not a threat. Had smiled at her like she was a person, not a political entity. Had asked for help without fear or calculation, just pragmatic problem-solving. It's fine, she said finally. The phrasing was fine. Great, Webb's smile widened. Well, I should get back to it. Stop by any time you're in the area. We could use someone with your reach. These stations are designed by people who apparently hate tall folks. An announcement echoed through the bay. Environmental systems restored. Diplomats could return to their quarters. Zareth found herself reluctant to leave, which was absurd. She had negotiations to finalize, treaties to review, the work of governance that never paused. But Webb smiled at her again, that same open, uncomplicated smile, and said thanks for the help. Like she'd done something genuinely useful, rather than simply being in the right place at the right time. Zareth left the engineering bay in a daze, Kyra trailing behind with obvious relief at returning to familiar territory. The diplomatic sector welcomed them back with its usual polished elegance, everything in its proper place, everyone maintaining proper distance. Zareth retired to her quarters early, claiming fatigue. Her staff accepted this without question. Maintaining the illusion of the tireless queen was exhausting, after all. Alone finally, she removed the ceremonial armor piece by piece, each section carefully stored according to tradition and protocol. Her reflection caught her eye in the polished mirror. 8 feet of Valorian female built for warfare, marked by rank and achievement. Too tall, too strong, too much for anyone in her entire species to want. Except a human engineer had looked at her and smiled like she was exactly right for reaching high couplings. Zareth allowed herself exactly 60 seconds of vulnerability, of wondering what it would be like to be seen as simply useful rather than intimidating. To have someone speak to her without fear or calculation, to be smiled at like she was just another person. Then she straightened, the armor, emotional if not literal, sliding back into place. She was Queen Zareth of the Valorian Empire. She had responsibilities, duties, a people depending on her leadership. She absolutely was not going to obsess over a grease-covered human who'd smiled at her in an engineering bay. The fact that she fell asleep, still thinking about that smile, was completely irrelevant. Zareth lasted 4 days before returning to the engineering levels, which by royal standards represented remarkable restraint. She told herself it was simple curiosity about station operations, that a good leader understood all aspects of the facilities where they conducted business. She told Kyra it was a diplomatic gesture, showing interest in the working-class sections of Vorath's Prime. She told her security detail it was a surprise inspection. She told herself a lot of lies, basically. The engineering bay was just as chaotic as she remembered, though this time nobody was managing environmental emergencies. Instead, regular maintenance proceeded with the same energetic disorder, humans and other species working in coordinated teams that somehow functioned despite looking completely anarchic. Webb was exactly where she'd left him, now arguing with a diagnostic console that apparently disagreed with his assessment of a coolant flow issue. He was gesturing emphatically at the screen, explaining to it why it was wrong, which seemed optimistic. "Machines don't respond to persuasion," Zareth said, and Webb jumped, spinning around so fast he nearly dropped his diagnostic tablet. "Queen, Your Majesty, I didn't." He stopped, took a breath, and that easy smile reappeared. "Sorry, you startled me. I was explaining to this console why its calculations are flawed, which probably looks ridiculous from an outside perspective." "It does," Zareth confirmed. "Does it work?" "Occasionally. Sometimes I think the systems respond better when I argue with them, but that's probably confirmation bias." He glanced at her, then at her very obvious lack of engineering equipment. "Can I help you with something? More high-reaching situations? I was curious about station operations." That's the most diplomatic way anyone's ever said, "I'm bored with fancy people doing fancy things," that I've heard. Webb gestured around the bay. "Welcome to where actual work happens. It's loud, it's messy, and the coffee's terrible, but we keep this station running. Want the tour?" Zareth found herself nodding, and Webb launched into enthusiastic explanations of fusion reactor configurations, power distribution networks, and the particular challenges of maintaining a structure that served as home to hundreds of species with wildly different environmental needs. He talked like someone genuinely in love with his work, and his complete lack of intimidation remained both startling and refreshing. "Your species must have impressive engineering," Webb said, examining one of her armor's joints again with that same appreciative interest. "The articulation here suggests really sophisticated understanding of biomechanics and material science." "Valorians have been crafting armor for millennia," Zareth said. "It's cultural tradition as much as practical necessity." "Do you actually fight in that? I mean, is it functional combat gear or ceremonial?" "Both. This is ceremonial, but I have combat variants. The principles are the same." "That's incredible. Humans never really perfected powered armor. Too many points of failure, and our bodies aren't structured for the weight distribution. But you're built differently." He said this with scientific curiosity, completely free of judgment. "Your skeletal structure must be significantly denser than human standard. How much can you lift comfortably?" Nobody had ever asked her that with such straightforward interest, like it was just another fascinating biological fact rather than an intimidating statistic. "Approximately 3 times my body weight overhead, more if it's a carry rather than a lift." Webb whistled appreciatively. "That's amazing. Your species must have some really interesting architectural and engineering solutions built around that capability. Like human construction is limited by what we can physically manipulate. But if your average person can move that much weight, your building techniques must be completely different." They talked for 2 hours, Webb asking questions nobody else had ever thought to ask. Not about military strength or political power, but about Valorian culture, art, what her world looked like, what music her people enjoyed. When she admitted she hadn't really engaged with Valorian arts in years, too consumed by governance, Webb looked genuinely sad about this. "That's rough. Everyone needs something besides work. What did you used to enjoy before you were queen?" Before she was queen, Zyrith tried to remember that person, young Zyrith, not yet carrying empire on her shoulders. I used to sculpt, stone carving traditional methods, it's meditative work. That makes sense. Working with your hands, seeing something take shape. Webb's expression brightened. Have you seen the observation deck on level 42? It's got this view of the nebula that's incredible, and the acoustics are weird in this great way. Sound bounces differently. I go there sometimes when I need to think. You might like it. You're inviting me to visit an observation deck. I'm suggesting a place you might find peaceful. But yeah, if you're there sometime and I'm there, we could hang out. He said this with such casual friendliness, like inviting the Valorian queen to hang out was perfectly normal. Fair warning though, I'll probably talk about engineering. It's apparently my only personality trait, according to my ex-wife. You're divorced. 3 years now. She wanted stability and kids and a house on Earth. I wanted to work on a space station fixing cooling systems. Turns out those aren't compatible goals. Webb shrugged, unbothered. We're still friends though. She sends me pictures of her new husband and their garden. Looks nice. His honesty was remarkable. You don't seem bitter about it. Why would I be bitter? She wanted one life, I wanted a different life. Neither of us was wrong. Sometimes things just don't work out and that's okay. Webb paused. Though she did get the good coffee maker in the divorce, which I maintain was unfair. Zyrith laughed, surprising herself. When had she last laughed? Really laughed, not the diplomatic chuckle she'd perfected for negotiations. Over the next week, Zyrith found excuses to return to the engineering levels. Webb was always happy to see her, always had new technical problems to explain or questions about Valorian culture. He introduced her to station coffee, which was indeed terrible, and human card games that involved bluffing and made her laugh at the sheer absurdity of deceiving people about hand rankings. He showed her Earth movies, particularly what he called disaster films, where everything possible went wrong and improbable heroes saved the day through engineering ingenuity and terrible one-liners. They're objectively bad, Webb admitted, but sometimes you need entertainment that doesn't require thinking. For the first time in years, Zyrith had fun. Simple, uncomplicated fun with someone who treated her like a person rather than a position. The station noticed. Gossip spread like reactor plasma through the diplomatic corridors. The Valorian queen was spending time in engineering, with a human. The implications ranged from political maneuvering to cultural exchange to, most scandalously, personal interest. Zyrith's advisors grew increasingly concerned. Kyra delivered careful reports about perception management and maintaining appropriate diplomatic distance. The Valorian delegation was particularly vocal. A noble named Kithras, who'd once attempted courting Zyrith before realizing the sheer terrifying reality of her presence, cornered her after a trade negotiation. Your Majesty, the delegation feels concern about your recent activities. My activities are my own concern, Kithras. Of course, Your Majesty, but spending time with a human, particularly one of no diplomatic standing, sends mixed messages about Valorian priorities. Zyrith turned to face him fully, using every inch of her height. What messages would those be? Kithras actually backed up a step. Simply that, Valorians are strong, we don't pursue lesser species. Lesser species. You're calling humans lesser. They're smaller, physically weaker, technologically behind us in most areas, and apparently confident enough to treat me like a person rather than a tactical threat. Zyrith's voice dropped to that resonant command tone that made backing down impossible. Webb has shown me more genuine respect in 2 weeks than most Valorians have in a decade. If that reflects poorly on Valorian priorities, perhaps our priorities need examination. She left Kithras stammering, but his words haunted her, because he'd articulated what she'd been trying to ignore. By Valorian standards, her interest in Webb was bizarre at best, shameful at worst. Humans were smaller, weaker, completely outside the cultural framework for appropriate partnerships. Being interested in Jackson Webb meant she was either desperate or defective. She almost stopped going to the engineering levels, almost convinced herself it was inappropriate, that maintaining proper distance was necessary for her position and dignity. Then Webb sent her a message through station communications. Found something I think you'll appreciate. Engineering Bay 3 when you have time. She went. Engineering Bay 3 housed one of the smaller fusion reactors, and Webb had somehow acquired a block of synthetic stone approximately 3 feet cubed. He grinned when she arrived. You said you used to sculpt. Figured you might like to try again. It's not traditional stone, probably different density and grain, but it's structurally similar. I cleared it with station management. You can work on it here when you want, and it's private enough that nobody will bother you. Zareth stared at the stone, at Webb's hopeful expression, at this ridiculous kind gesture from someone who barely knew her. Why? She asked. Why what? Why would you do this? Webb looked genuinely confused. Because you said you enjoyed sculpting and gave it up. That seems sad. If I can help you get back something you loved, why wouldn't I? You barely know me. I know you're interesting and fun to talk to and you laugh at my terrible jokes. That's enough for me. He paused, something more serious crossing his face. Look, I've noticed people treat you differently. Like you're scary or untouchable or something. And maybe that's politics or cultural stuff I don't understand. But I think everyone deserves to have something just for themselves, something that makes them happy. If sculpting does that for you, then you should sculpt. Zareth felt something crack in her chest, something that had been frozen for years warming uncomfortably. Jackson. Just Webb is fine. Webb, I need to tell you something. Okay. I'm not just spending time down here for cultural interest. I'm spending time down here because of you. Because you're the first person in longer than I can remember who's treated me like I'm just someone. Not a threat, not a political entity, not something to manage or avoid. Just Zareth. Webb considered this seriously. Okay, and you're telling me this because? Because it's inappropriate. Because I'm a queen and you're an engineer. Because by every standard my culture provides, being interested in you is wrong. Are you interested in me? Romantically interested? The direct question made lying impossible. Yes. Webb smiled, and it was that same open, genuine smile that had started everything. That's great. I'm interested in you too. Have been since that first day when you helped with the coupling and then laughed at my terrible cooling system jokes. Zareth felt the floor tilt beneath her, though the station's gravity was perfectly stable. You're interested in me. Yeah, you're brilliant, funny when you let yourself relax, and you care about things deeply even though you try to hide it. Also, and I mean this respectfully, you're beautiful. The whole tall, powerful thing, that's not intimidating to me. That's impressive. I'm 8 feet tall. I noticed I'm 5'10". It's a height difference, not a moral failing. Webb stepped closer, looking up at her with no trace of fear or discomfort. Zareth, I don't know all the cultural baggage around this for your people, but I can tell you what I think. You're amazing exactly as you are. If other people have a problem with your height or strength, that's their insecurity, not your problem. And if you're interested in me despite me being a fairly average human who talks to machines too much, then I'd really like to take you to dinner. Real dinner, not station cafeteria food. There's a decent restaurant on the civilian levels that does Valorian cuisine. You researched Valorian cuisine. I research things I care about. Webb's expression turned uncertain. But if this is too complicated, or if you're not actually interested and we're just being polite, that's okay too. I just wanted you to know that I think you're incredible and I'd like to spend more time with you. Officially. Zareth had commanded armies, negotiated with hostile species, faced down threats that would make most beings flee in terror. None of that required as much courage as what she did next. I would like to have dinner with you, Jackson Webb. His smile was incandescent. Yeah, that's really great. He laughed, slightly giddy. I should probably clean up first. I'm covered in grease. I've noticed, and we should probably figure out security protocols, since you're royalty and there are probably procedures. Webb. Yeah. Stop overthinking this. Right, yes, okay. He took a breath, composure returning. Tomorrow evening, 1900 hours. That works. They stood there grinning at each other like idiots, until another engineer shouted for Webb's help with a malfunctioning pressure valve, and reality reasserted itself. But as Zyrith left the engineering bay, she felt lighter than she had in years. Kyra was waiting in her quarters with reports and barely concealed concern. Your Majesty, the Valorian delegation has requested private audience. They wish to discuss your activities. They wish to discuss my personal life, you mean? Yes, Your Majesty. Schedule it for tomorrow afternoon. I'll address their concerns directly. Zyrith smiled at Kyra's worried expression. It's fine, Kyra. I know what I'm doing. She didn't really. She had no idea how this would work, what the political implications were, how her people would react to their queen dating a human engineer. But for the first time in her adult life, Zyrith was choosing something for herself rather than for duty, protocol, or political necessity. The next afternoon, she faced the Valorian delegation in her private conference chamber. 8 nobles, including Kithra's, arranged themselves with careful formality. All male, all smaller than her, all radiating disapproval. Your Majesty, Kithra's began, we wish to discuss your relationship with the human engineer. I wasn't aware. I needed the delegation's permission for personal relationships. Of course not, Your Majesty, but your choices reflect on all Valorians. This human is beneath your station, beneath your capabilities. It suggests. Weakness. Weakness? Zyrith let the word hang. Explain. Another noble, Thuron, the one who'd once been her friend, spoke carefully. Valorian females traditionally partner with males who can match their strategic thinking, provide cultural elevation. This human is a technician and he's physically. Thuron trailed off, clearly uncomfortable. Smaller than me, weaker by Valorian standards. Yes, I've noticed. Continue. It's unseemly, Your Majesty. What will other species think? What will our own people think? That their queen couldn't attract an appropriate Valorian male, so she settled for a lesser option. Zyrith stood, using every inch of her height, letting her full presence fill the room. The nobles shifted uncomfortably, and she felt that familiar bitter satisfaction. They feared her, just like everyone else. Then she thought of Webb's smile, his complete lack of fear, his genuine appreciation for exactly who she was. Let me be exceptionally clear, Zyrith said, her voice carrying that command resonance. I have spent a decade as your queen, leading with strength and wisdom, elevating our empire to significance in this sector. I have been a perfect representative of Valorian values, strong, strategic, uncompromising. And in that decade, not one Valorian male has shown genuine interest in me as a person. You fear me. You resent me. You pursue smaller females you can feel powerful beside. And you judge me for being exactly what Valorian genetics made me. Your Majesty, that's not. I'm not finished. Jackson Webb is human. He's smaller and physically weaker than any Valorian. By your narrow standards, he's inappropriate. But he treats me with more genuine respect and appreciation than any of you have managed. He sees my strength as impressive rather than threatening. He enjoys my company without calculating political advantage. He makes me laugh, which none of you have ever attempted. So yes, I'm interested in him. Yes, I'm going to pursue this relationship. And if that reflects poorly on Valorian culture, perhaps the problem is with the culture, not with me. Silence greeted this speech. Finally, Kithra's found his voice. What will you tell our people? The truth. That I'm building a relationship with someone who values me for who I am rather than fearing what I am. If they find that shameful, they're welcome to elect a new queen. But I'm done shrinking myself to fit standards designed to make others comfortable. She dismissed the delegation, ignoring their uncomfortable muttering. Kyra entered after they'd left, her expression unreadable. That was quite a declaration, Your Majesty. It was honest, at least. The political implications will be significant. They always are. Zyrith looked at her advisor, her friend. Do you think I'm making a mistake? Kyra was quiet for a long moment. I think you've been alone a very long time, Your Majesty, and I think this human makes you happy in ways I haven't seen before. If that's a mistake, it's a very human one, perhaps appropriately. That evening, Zyrith met Webb at the restaurant wearing minimal ceremonial armor, enough to be appropriate for a queen in public, not enough to be overwhelming. Webb arrived exactly on time, wearing clean clothes that were clearly his nice outfit, his hair actually combed. You clean up well, Zyrith observed. I own exactly 2 outfits that aren't covered in grease. This is the better one. Webb smiled nervously. You look incredible, though you always do. They were seated in a semi-private booth. Webb had apparently requested specific accommodations for Zyrith's height, and the restaurant had provided a table configuration that didn't make her feel like furniture designed for children. The gesture was small but significant. Dinner was surprisingly comfortable. Webb asked about her day, listened to her frustrations with the delegation, and offered no solutions or platitudes, just understanding. That sounds exhausting. Being judged constantly for things you can't change. It's part of being queen. It's part of being you, which is different. The queen thing is your job. The you thing is who you are. They should be able to separate that. But people are terrible at separating roles from individuals. They talked about his work, his family on Earth, a sister who was apparently aggressively normal, and parents who'd been confused but supportive when he'd chosen space stations over stability. He showed her pictures of his niece and nephew, pride obvious in his voice. Do you want children? Zyrith asked, then immediately regretted the question. Too personal too soon, but Webb considered it seriously. Honestly, I don't know. I used to think I did, but that was partly because it's what you're supposed to want, you know. Now I think I'd be open to it with the right person, but it's not a requirement for happiness. Why? Valorian succession requires heirs. It's expected that queens produce them. That sounds like a lot of pressure. It is. Zyrith paused. Also, humans and Valorians aren't biologically compatible for reproduction. So that particular expectation becomes irrelevant if we. She trailed off, unsure how to finish. If we become serious, Webb supplied. Yeah, I figured biological incompatibility was likely. That doesn't bother me if it doesn't bother you. There are other ways to have children if that's something you want, or not to have them if you don't. The biology doesn't dictate the relationship. His matter-of-fact approach to impossibly complex questions was remarkable. You make it sound simple. The feelings are simple. I like you, you like me, we want to spend time together. Everything else is logistics, and I'm an engineer. Logistics are solvable. Webb reached across the table, and his hand found hers, small by Valorian standards but warm and confident. I'm not saying it'll be easy. Cross-species relationships probably have complications I haven't even thought of yet, but I think you're worth figuring it out. Zyrith looked at their joined hands, the size difference obvious but somehow not wrong. I've spent years believing I was too much for anyone to want. You're not too much. You're exactly right. Webb squeezed her hand gently, and anyone who made you feel otherwise was an idiot with bad priorities. They stayed at the restaurant until closing, talking and laughing, and when Webb walked her back to the diplomatic sector, he stopped at the boundary where security protocols would separate them. This was really great, he said. Can we do it again? Yes, Zyrith said, and surprised herself by leaning down to kiss him, brief and tentative but real. Webb's smile when she pulled back was worth every political complication this relationship would cause. Tomorrow, he asked hopefully. I have trade negotiations until 1800 hours. 1900 then. I'll find something fun for us to do. Fair warning, my idea of fun might involve explaining reactor configurations. I look forward to it. Walking back to her quarters alone, Zyrith felt something unfamiliar. Hope. Not for treaties or political victories, but for something personal and real and hers. The station's gossip networks would be burning by morning. Her delegation would be scandalized. There would be political consequences and cultural complications and probably formal protests. But Jackson Webb had smiled at her like she was exactly right, and for the first time in her life, Zyrith believed him. The scandal spread through Vorath's prime like a reactor breach, fast, hot, and impossible to contain. By the third day of Zyrith and Webb's official relationship, every delegation knew, every diplomat had opinions, and the station's informal betting pools had apparently reached ridiculous stakes on how long it would last. Zyrith's morning briefing included Kyra's carefully neutral report on public perception management challenges, which was diplomatic speak for everyone's talking about you dating the human. The Valorian delegation has filed 3 separate formal complaints, Kyra reported. The Thaxian ambassador requested clarification on whether this affects trade negotiations. And apparently someone started a station-wide discussion forum about interspecies relationship dynamics that's gotten extensive. How extensive? 4,000 posts in 2 days. The moderators are overwhelmed. Zyrith should have been concerned. Instead, she found herself fighting a smile because Webb had sent her a message that morning. Someone left a copy of Interspecies Romance for Dummies outside my quarters. I'm choosing to interpret this as supportive. Meet for lunch. They'd fallen into a routine over the past weeks, stolen hours between her diplomatic obligations and his engineering shifts, meals in quiet corners of the station, late evenings in that observation deck Webb had mentioned where they could talk without performance or protocol. He'd introduced her to human music, everything from classical to what he called criminally bad pop that's fun anyway. She'd taught him Valorian strategy games that involved spatial reasoning and made him laugh when he lost spectacularly. And they'd talked, really talked, about everything from childhood memories to philosophical questions about leadership and purpose. Webb had a way of asking questions that made her think differently about herself, not challenging her conclusions but examining her assumptions. Why do you think you have to be perfect? He'd asked one evening after she'd mentioned a negotiation she felt she'd handled poorly. Because I'm queen. Mistakes reflect on my entire empire. That's the job answer. But why do you think you personally have to be perfect? Zyrith had been quiet for a long time. Because if I'm not perfect, I'm proving them right. Everyone who said I was too much, too difficult, unlovable. If I'm perfect, I can pretend that's the reason they rejected me. Because I'm intimidatingly flawless, not because I'm fundamentally wrong. Webb had taken her hand. You're not fundamentally wrong. You're fundamentally you, and that's different from wrong. Those conversations were healing something in Zyrith she hadn't realized was broken. But they were also making the external pressure more difficult to bear. Because the more she opened herself to Webb, the more exposed she became to judgment. The breaking point came during a formal trade negotiation with a coalition of minor systems. Zyrith was presenting terms when one of the delegates, a Valorian noble named Saren who'd been vocal in his criticism, interrupted. Your Majesty, before we proceed, the delegation wishes clarity on your current situation. It affects our confidence in Valorian leadership. Zyrith kept her expression neutral. My personal relationships don't affect trade policy. With respect, Your Majesty, they affect perception. You're pursuing a human technician despite available Valorian options. It suggests compromised judgment or, worse, desperation. The room went silent. This was beyond diplomatic friction. This was direct challenge to her authority. Zyrith stood slowly, using every intimidating inch of her height. You believe my choice of partner reflects compromised judgment. Saren held his ground, barely. I believe it reflects poorly on Valorian strength. We don't pursue lesser species. Lesser species. Zyrith's voice dropped to that dangerous resonance. You're calling humans lesser in what way? their technological achievements. They've reached comparable development to us through different paths. Their cultural sophistication. I've learned more about art and philosophy from Jackson Webb than from any Valorian in years. Their physical capability. She smiled without humor. Webb doesn't fear me. Can you say the same? That's not. Can you? Zyrith moved around the table, and Saren actually retreated. You stand there questioning my judgment while simultaneously proving exactly why I'm interested in someone outside our species. Webb treats me as an equal despite our physical differences. You treat me as a threat despite our genetic similarities. So tell me, Saren, which of us has better judgment? Your Majesty, we simply feel. I don't care what you feel. I care about your ability to negotiate in good faith and honor agreements. If you can't separate personal opinions from professional obligations, you're dismissed from this delegation. Saren left, humiliated and furious. The remaining delegates completed negotiations in record time, possibly motivated by not wanting to also be dismissed. When they'd finally gone, Zyrith sat alone in the conference chamber, adrenaline fading into exhaustion. Her communicator chimed, Webb, of course. Heard you verbally destroyed someone in negotiations. Want to talk about it? She found him in Engineering Bay 3, working on her sculpture block. He'd apparently been researching Valorian carving techniques and had started teaching himself. His attempts charmingly terrible but genuinely committed. I'm making your stone look bad, he admitted, showing her a lopsided attempt at geometric patterns. But it's actually really meditative once you get past the everything I do looks awful phase. You've been practicing. Figured if it's something you loved, I should understand why. Plus, hitting rocks with chisels is surprisingly therapeutic. Webb set down his tools. Kyra sent me a message, said you might need someone to talk to. Kyra is overstepping. Kyra cares about you, so do I. What happened? Zyrith explained the confrontation, Saren's accusations, her own response. Webb listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he was quiet for a moment. That sounds exhausting, he said finally. Having to defend your choices constantly while also managing actual political responsibilities. It's part of leadership. It's part of people being judgmental. Webb stood, moving closer. Zyrith, you know this is going to keep happening, right? Not everyone's going to accept us. Some people will always think you're making a mistake, that I'm somehow beneath you or you're somehow desperate. We need to figure out how we're dealing with that, because I don't want you fighting battles alone that we should be fighting together. This isn't just your relationship, it's ours. If people are going to judge us, they can judge us both. Webb smiled slightly. Though I think you're much better at the intimidating responses, I tend toward sarcasm, which is less effective. What would you have said to Saren? Probably something about how insecurity makes people say stupid things, and if he spent half as much energy on self-improvement as he did on judging others, he might actually be tolerable company. Then I'd have gotten myself thrown out of the negotiation for being unprofessional. Despite everything, Zyrith laughed. You're ridiculous. I'm honest, there's a difference. Webb took her hands, looking up at her seriously. I need you to know something. I'm in this. Not just the fun parts where we talk and laugh and I get to kiss someone way out of my league. All of it. The political complications, the cultural judgment, the lesser species insults. If being with you means dealing with that, I'm choosing to deal with that. Because you're worth it. You might be the only person in the universe who thinks so. Then the universe has terrible judgment, and I'm smarter than the universe. Webb pulled her down. She had to bend significantly for this to work, and kissed her properly. We'll figure it out, Zyrith, together. The next morning, Webb did something Zyrith hadn't expected. He published an open letter on the station's public forums. She discovered it when Kyra forwarded the link with the message, "You should read this." On dating someone extraordinary. A Human Perspective by Jackson Webb, station engineer. There's been a lot of discussion lately about my relationship with Queen Zyrith of the Valorian Empire. Most of it's speculation, Some of it's supportive, and some of it's been pretty insulting. I figure it's time for my perspective. Yes, I'm dating Zyrith. Yes, she's a queen and I'm an engineer. Yes, she's 8 feet tall and I'm 5'10". Yes, she's Valorian and I'm human. Everyone's very observant about these facts. Here's what everyone seems to be missing. She's incredible. She's brilliant, funny when she relaxes enough to let herself be funny, deeply committed to her people, and kind in ways that surprised me. She's also been alone for most of her adult life because people decided she was too much based on things she can't change. I've been told I'm lesser because I'm human, that I'm physically weaker, technologically primitive, somehow inappropriate for someone of her status. Here's my response to that. First, measuring worth by physical strength is stupid. By that logic, construction equipment is more valuable than doctors. Strength is useful, but it's not the measure of a person. Second, I treat Zyrith like a person because she is one. She's not a threat, not a political entity, not an intimidating figure to manage. She's someone I care about who happens to have extraordinary responsibilities. If that's unusual, maybe the problem is with how everyone else treats her. Third, being with someone from a different species means learning and adapting. It means sometimes you don't fit conventional expectations. It means getting creative about solutions. That's not weakness. That's the foundation of exploration and discovery that brought humans into space in the first place. So yeah, I'm dating someone extraordinary. I'm lucky to be doing so. And if that makes people uncomfortable, that's their problem to solve, not ours. Also, whoever left interspecies romance for dummies at my door. Thanks, it was actually pretty informative. The post went viral, 15,000 responses in 6 hours. The reactions ranged from supportive, "This is what healthy relationships look like," to hostile, human arrogance thinking he's worthy of Valorian royalty, to unexpectedly thoughtful discussions about cultural biases and relationship dynamics across species. But what stunned Zyrith was the section of responses from other Valorian females, dozens of them, sharing their own experiences of being judged as too much, of being lonely because they didn't fit the cultural ideal of a female their males could feel powerful beside. One post from a Valorian military officer resonated particularly. "I've spent 10 years pretending to be weaker than I am so males would find me appealing. Watching Queen Zyrith choose someone who appreciates her strength makes me wonder why I'm still pretending." Another from a scientist. "My research partner asked me out last year. I said no because he was smaller than me and I was embarrassed. After reading Webb's letter, I realized I let cultural expectations dictate my happiness. I've reached out to him again. Wish me luck." Kyra found Zyrith reading through the responses, tears in her eyes she absolutely wouldn't acknowledge. "Webb's letter has created significant discussion, Your Majesty. It's making people question things. That can be uncomfortable. It can also be necessary." Kyra paused. "For what it's worth, I think he's good for you. You've been happier these past weeks than I've seen in years. Even with all the complications. Especially with the complications. Because you're choosing something for yourself rather than just accepting what you're given. That's powerful, Your Majesty. It's also terrifying, but growth usually is." That evening, Webb found Zyrith in the observation deck he'd shown her, watching the nebula swirl in shades of violet and gold. "I read your letter," she said when he sat beside her. "Was it too much? I probably should have checked with you first, but I was angry about the lesser species thing and needed to respond. It was perfect, terrifying but perfect. Terrifying. You made yourself vulnerable publicly, defended me publicly. That makes you a target for people who want to hurt me through you." Webb considered this. "That's a possibility, but living carefully to avoid possible pain seems like a waste of the time we have. I'd rather be honest and deal with consequences than play it safe and miss out on something real." Zyrith leaned against him, carefully, always aware of the strength differential, always concerned she might accidentally hurt him. Webb didn't seem to share that concern, shifting to make them both comfortable with practiced ease. "Your letter started something," Zyrith said. "Other Valorian females are responding, sharing experiences. You might have accidentally started a cultural movement. Is that good or bad?" "I don't know yet, but it's real and it's honest, so probably good eventually." She turned to look at him. "Jackson, this is going to get more complicated before it gets easier. There will be formal protests, political challenges, possibly threats. Are you certain you want to continue this?" Webb met her eyes steadily. "I love you." "Is that too soon to say?" "Probably. But it's true. I love you, your strength, your intelligence, your terrible attempts to pretend you're not funny. I love that you trust me enough to be vulnerable. I love that you're letting yourself want something just for you rather than for duty. So yeah, I'm certain. Whatever complications come, we'll handle them together." Zyrith had faced down military threats without flinching. She'd negotiated with hostile species without showing weakness. But hearing Jackson Webb say he loved her made her cry, actual tears, streaming down her face while she sat in an observation deck with a human engineer who thought she was exactly right. "I love you too," she managed, "which is terrifying." "Love usually is." Webb wiped tears from her face with gentle hands. "But I think we can handle terrifying. You've commanded armies. I've fixed fusion reactors while they were actively malfunctioning. Between us, we can probably manage one complicated relationship." They sat together watching stars, two beings from different worlds who'd found each other through accident and choice. Outside, the station hummed with life and gossip and complicated politics. Inside the observation deck, they were simply Zyrith and Jackson, choosing each other despite every logical reason not to. It was terrifying. It was also perfect. 6 months later, Vorathis Prime hosted what became known as the Diplomatic Summit of Unexpected Alliances, though everyone privately called it. That conference, where the Valorian Queen and her human boyfriend accidentally revolutionized cross-species relationship politics. Zyrith stood at the summit's opening ceremony beside Jackson Webb, who'd somehow been promoted to chief engineer despite his persistent insistence that he just wanted to fix things and avoid administrative responsibilities. He wore formal attire that made him look almost diplomatic, though he'd complained extensively about unnecessary fabric during the fitting process. "You look good," Zyrith murmured. "I look uncomfortable. There's a difference." Webb tugged at his collar. "Why do formal clothes always feel like they're trying to strangle you?" "It's character building. My character is fine. I don't need fabric-based improvement." Ambassador Thorne from Earth Command approached, her expression diplomatically neutral but her eyes amused. "Your Majesty, Mr. Webb, the Earth delegation is honored to participate in these proceedings." "We're honored to host them, Ambassador." Zyrith kept her tone formal, though Thorne had become something of an ally over the months. The Earth government had recognized the strategic advantage of having one of their citizens in a relationship with the Valorian Queen and had been surprisingly supportive in their calculating political way. Thorne leaned in slightly. "Mr. Webb, your mother has sent 3 more care packages to the Earth delegation. She's insistent we deliver them personally. She seems convinced you're not eating properly." "My mother thinks the entire universe isn't eating properly," Webb said. "It's her default state." She also sent a lengthy message about when she can expect to visit and meet Queen Zyrith. I believe the exact phrase was, "I raised you to introduce your girlfriends properly, Jackson Webb, and being in space isn't an excuse." Zyrith felt Webb's genuine panic. "Oh no. I haven't, I should have." "She's coming to the station next month," Zyrith said calmly. "I invited her, and your father and your sister's family." "You what?" "You've met my advisors, my delegation, my entire political structure. It seemed appropriate to meet your family." Zyrith smiled at his expression. "Unless you're embarrassed to introduce me." "I'm not embarrassed. I'm terrified. My mother is going to interrogate you about everything from your intentions to whether we're using proper sun protection." "She's a lot." I command armies, Jackson. I think I can handle your mother. You say that now, Webb muttered, but he was smiling. The summit itself was remarkable. Dozens of species gathered to discuss not just traditional diplomatic concerns, but the emerging complexities of interspecies personal relationships. Webb's open letter had started conversations that refused to stop. Mixed species partnerships were forming across the station. Cultural assumptions were being challenged. And at the center of it all, somewhat accidentally, were Zyrith and Webb. During a break, Princess Elendra of the Valorian military approached Zyrith privately. She was a prominent general, tall even by Valorian standards, and had been one of the few supportive voices during the initial scandal. Your Majesty, I wanted to thank you. For what? For being brave enough to choose someone outside cultural expectations. After seeing you with Webb, I finally contacted someone I've been interested in for years, a Centaurian trade officer. We've been seeing each other for 3 months now. Elendra smiled. He's shorter than me, has no interest in military matters, and makes me laugh constantly. My family thinks I've lost my mind. I've never been happier. I'm glad, Zyrith said genuinely. You deserve happiness. So do you, Your Majesty. And watching you claim it gave the rest of us permission to do the same. Stories like this had become common. The personal had become political in ways Zyrith hadn't intended but couldn't regret. By choosing Webb, by being public about that choice, she'd accidentally given others courage to make their own choices. The summit's main debate concerned formal protocols for mixed-species partnerships, legal frameworks, medical considerations, cultural respect requirements. It was tedious diplomatic work, but necessary. And Webb participated, bringing his practical engineer's perspective to theoretical discussions, and somehow making bureaucrats laugh about relationship contract clauses. During one particularly dense legal debate, Webb raised his hand. Question: why are we making this so complicated? Two beings want to be together, they establish clear communication and mutual respect, they figure out logistics. Do we really need 16 subsections about proper cultural introductions? A Thaxian diplomat responded primly. Mr. Webb, relationships between species require careful navigation to avoid misunderstandings. Sure, but so do relationships within species. Every relationship requires navigation. Why are we treating cross-species partnerships like they're fundamentally different rather than just relationships with slightly more unusual logistics? Because the cultural implications are important, yeah, but they're not more important than the actual people involved. You know what makes relationships work? People genuinely caring about each other and being willing to adapt. That's universal. Webb glanced at Zyrith. I'm probably oversimplifying. You're cutting through unnecessary complexity, Zyrith corrected. That's different. The summit eventually produced frameworks that were both comprehensive and flexible. Enough structure to address genuine concerns. Enough freedom to allow individual relationships to develop naturally. Webb called it bureaucracy that doesn't completely suck, which Zyrith chose to interpret as praise. When Webb's family arrived the following month, Zyrith discovered that his mother was indeed a lot, in the best possible way. Margaret Webb took one look at Zyrith and said, "Oh good, you're tall." Jackson always dated short women and complained about back pain from bending down to kiss them. This is much more practical. Mom, you can't comment on people's heights, Webb protested. I absolutely can. Height is observable fact. Margaret turned to Zyrith. He's told me you're a queen, which sounds stressful. Are you eating enough? Jackson never eats enough when he's stressed. I eat fine, Webb and Zyrith said simultaneously, then looked at each other and laughed. Webb's father, David, was quieter but equally direct. Jackson's always been independent. Went his own way, didn't care much about others' opinions. But I've never seen him this happy. Thank you for that, Your Majesty. Just Zyrith, please. And I should thank you for raising someone kind and honest. Those aren't universal traits. We tried, mostly we just didn't mess him up too badly. David smiled, though his sister deserves credit for that too. Amanda Webb proved to be as aggressively normal as Jackson had claimed. A school teacher from Colorado with strong opinions about education policy and zero patience for pretension. She arm-wrestled Zyrith within an hour of arriving. I have to know if the stories are true. Lost spectacularly and declared it absolutely worth it. Over dinner, which Thessa had prepared with careful attention to human dietary needs while accommodating Valorian cuisine, Webb's family asked questions ranging from serious, "How do you manage political responsibilities across star systems?" to ridiculous, "Do you have any embarrassing stories about Jackson we should know?" He once spent an entire day troubleshooting a malfunction that turned out to be an equipment switch left in the off position, Zyrith offered. "That was one time and the switch was unlabeled," Webb protested while his family laughed. Watching Webb with his family, the easy teasing, the genuine affection, the complete lack of performance, Zyrith felt something settle in her chest. This was what healthy relationships looked like. Comfortable, honest, built on foundation of actual care rather than political calculation or cultural expectation. Later, Margaret found Zyrith alone on the observation deck. "This is lovely. I can see why Jackson likes it here. It's become one of my favorite places on the station." "He loves you very much," Margaret said directly. "I hope you know that. He's not always good at expressing emotions clearly, gets too logical about everything, but his feelings for you are genuine and deep. I know and I love him." "Good, because if you hurt him, queen or not, we're having words." Margaret said this cheerfully, but Zyrith heard the steel beneath. "Though honestly, I'm more worried about political nonsense hurting both of you. People can be very stupid about things that don't concern them. We've managed so far." "You have, but that's been 6 months. What about 6 years, 60? Margaret looked at her seriously. "I'm not trying to discourage you. I just want to make sure you've both thought about the long term. Jackson's committed. When he decides something, he's stubborn about seeing it through. But relationships need more than stubbornness." "We talk about it," Zyrith said. "The logistics, the complications. He's planning to request permanent assignment on Vorath's Prime to avoid us being separated by duty rotations. I'm establishing protocols that let me govern remotely when necessary, rather than requiring constant presence on Valorian homeworld. It won't be perfect, but we're committed to making it work." Margaret studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "That's what I needed to hear, not that it's perfect but that you're both willing to adapt." She paused. "Jackson's father and I almost didn't make it past our 3rd year. He wanted to move for a job opportunity. I wanted to stay near my family. We fought about it for months. Eventually we realized we were both trying to win an argument instead of solving a problem together. That's when we got creative, found a compromise neither of us had considered initially. That's what relationships are. Continuous problem solving with someone you'd rather not solve problems without." "That's wise," Zyrith said. "That's experience. Wisdom is just experience you've actually learned from." Margaret smiled. "For what it's worth, I think you're good for him. He's more grounded, more genuinely happy. And from what I've seen, he's good for you too. You laugh more than I expected a queen to laugh. He makes it easy. The good ones do." 3 days before Webb's family departed, Zyrith convened a private council meeting that included her Valorian advisors, Webb and Ambassador Thorne from Earth. The topic: formalizing her relationship with Webb in a way that satisfied both Valorian political requirements and their personal needs. Valorian tradition requires queens to formalize long-term partnerships through ceremonial bonding, Kyra explained to the room. It's not legally binding like human marriage, but it's culturally significant, a public declaration of commitment and partnership. "I'm familiar with the concept," Webb said. "I've been researching Valorian customs. There's also the succession question. Valorian law requires heirs, and we've established I can't provide those biologically." "The law requires heirs, not biological heirs," Zyrith corrected. Adoption is traditionally acceptable. Several Valorian queens have adopted successors from within the royal lineage. So we adopt. Webb looked thoughtful. I'm not opposed, though that's a conversation about whether we both want children, which feels important to have before making declarations to legal councils. Which is why we're having it now. Zareth looked at him seriously. Do you want children, Jackson? With you? Yeah, actually, I do. Not immediately. We should probably figure out living on the same station permanently first, but eventually. I think we'd be good parents. You'd be terrifyingly competent at it, and I'd provide the necessary chaos to keep things interesting. Zareth felt warmth spread through her chest. I would like children as well, eventually, with you. Ambassador Thorne cleared her throat. Earth Command supports formalizing this partnership. The political and trade benefits of a formal alliance between Earth and Valoria are significant. We're prepared to offer Mr. Webb a permanent diplomatic position, if that facilitates the arrangement. I don't want a diplomatic position, Webb said immediately. I want to fix things and occasionally advise on engineering projects. Can we make that the formal job description? We can make that work, Thorne said, amused. The formalization ceremony was planned for 2 months later, giving time for proper preparations and political negotiations. Valorian traditionalists protested. Earth media went into speculation overdrive, and the station's betting pools reached truly absurd stakes on various ceremony details. Through it all, Zareth and Webb continued their routines. Dinners in quiet corners, late evenings in the observation deck, stolen moments in the engineering bay where Zareth had finally completed her stone sculpture. 2 figures, one tall and one shorter, standing together looking at stars. Webb had declared it the best piece of art on this entire station, which was biased but appreciated. The ceremony itself was a fusion of traditions. Valorian ceremonial components, the exchange of war markings, the public declaration of partnership, the formal recognition by the council, combined with human elements Webb had requested. His family present, Earth music during the celebration, and vows they'd written themselves rather than traditional scripts. When the moment came for public declaration, Zareth stood before the assembled crowd. Valorian nobles, Earth diplomats, station residents from dozens of species, with Webb beside her, looking up at her with that same smile that had started everything. I choose Jackson Webb as my partner and co-regent, Zareth declared in the formal Valorian declaration. Not because protocol demands it, not because political advantage requires it, but because he makes me better. He sees my strength as impressive rather than threatening. He treats my authority as responsibility rather than intimidation. He loves me not despite who I am, but because of who I am. And I love him with the same certainty I bring to command, completely, without reservation, without doubt. Webb's human vows were less formal but equally powerful. I choose Zareth as my partner in my home. She's brilliant, funny, occasionally terrifying, and the best thing that ever happened to me. I promise to support her, challenge her when necessary, make her laugh when possible, and always treat her like the incredible person she is rather than the intimidating queen everyone else sees. Also, I promise to properly maintain all ceremonial armor, because apparently that's important, and I'm very good at maintenance. The crowd laughed, tension breaking into genuine warmth. They sealed the ceremony with the Valorian tradition of marking. Zareth drew a silver line along Webb's collarbone. Webb marked her wrist with corresponding silver. The marks would fade eventually, but photographs would last forever. The Valorian queen and her human engineer, choosing each other publicly despite every reason not to. The celebration afterward was remarkable. Valorian traditional music mixed with Earth jazz, formal diplomatic dances beside casual human line dancing that confused several species. Webb's mother danced with a Valorian general. Princess Elendra introduced her Centaurian partner to supportive cheers. Ambassador Thorne gave a speech about building bridges between worlds, one improbable relationship at a time. Late in the evening, Zyrith and Webb escaped to their familiar observation deck, now officially their shared quarters. The station had provided expanded space that accommodated both Valorian and human ergonomic needs. "We did it," Webb said, looking at the silver mark on his collarbone in a reflective surface. "We're officially bonded according to two different species traditions. That's wild." "That's permanent," Zyrith corrected. "Are you having second thoughts?" "Not even slightly, you." "Never." Zyrith pulled him close, careful as always but more confident now after months of learning exactly how to navigate their strength differential. "Though I should warn you, now that we're formally bonded, you'll be expected to attend significantly more diplomatic functions." "Will there be terrible food at these functions?" "Almost certainly." "Will you be there?" "Obviously." "Then I can tolerate diplomatic functions." Webb kissed her, then pulled back with a thoughtful expression. "Your mom sent a message. Said she's planning to visit in 3 months and wants to meet me properly. Also mentioned something about assessing whether I'm worthy and tradition. My mother is formidable. More formidable than you. In different ways, yes. Terrifying, I look forward to it." Webb smiled. "Your mom, my mom, various political entities, cultural expectations. We'll handle all of it. Together." "Together," Zyrith agreed. They stood together at the viewport, watching ships arrive and depart from Vorath's prime, each vessel carrying beings with their own stories and complications. Somewhere out there, Zyrith knew, other people were having similar realizations. That love didn't follow convenient cultural scripts, that the right person might come in unexpected forms, that being too much. For some people just meant you were perfect for someone else. 6 months ago, she'd been the queen nobody dared approach, too tall, too strong, too commanding. Now she was simply Zyrith, bonded to a human engineer who'd smiled at her and changed everything. "What are you thinking about?" Webb asked. "How grateful I am that your navigation didn't malfunction and send you somewhere else." "My navigation works fine, thank you very much. Though if it had malfunctioned, I hope it would have sent me here anyway. This is where I was supposed to end up. Destiny. Logistics. I was always going to end up somewhere I could fix things and meet interesting people. You were always going to end up somewhere doing important diplomatic work. The odds of those somewheres intersecting were actually pretty good if you think about it. That's the least romantic analysis of our relationship I've ever heard. Fine, destiny, magic, cosmic intervention, whatever makes you happy." Webb grinned, "But I'm still right about the logistics." Zyrith laughed, the sound coming easily now, naturally. Below them, the station hummed with life, thousands of beings from hundreds of worlds, all navigating the complicated business of existing together in space. It wasn't perfect. It was messy and chaotic and occasionally produced unexpected outcomes like a Valorian queen falling for a human engineer who wasn't intimidated by her height. But it was real and it was theirs and it was exactly right. "I love you," Zyrith said, "because sometimes the simplest truths were the most important." "I love you too," Webb replied, looking up at her with those steady eyes that had never once shown fear. "Even though you're tall and powerful and occasionally terrifying. Actually, especially because of those things. They're part of what makes you perfect." "I'm not perfect." "No, but you're perfect for me. That's different." Webb pulled her down for another kiss. "Now come on, we should probably go back to the celebration before your advisors send a search party." Kyra looked increasingly concerned that we disappeared. 5 more minutes. You're the queen. You can take as many minutes as you want. Then I want 5 more minutes here with you." They stood together in their observation deck, the stars beyond, the station around them, and each other finally, completely, certainly. Zyrith had commanded armies and negotiated treaties, and led her people through challenges that would have broken lesser leaders. But standing here with Jackson Webb, bonded and committed and choosing each other daily despite every complication, this was the bravest thing she'd ever done. And it was absolutely worth it. Outside, the celebration continued. Inside their quiet space, two beings from different worlds had found home in each other, proving that sometimes the right size for love had nothing to do with height or strength or cultural expectations. Sometimes it was just about finding someone brave enough to smile back.